It's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, sport, showbiz and beyond, as well as those who simply have a big story to tell. Bob Moran is a multi-award-winning British illustrator and cartoonist who lost his job with the Daily Telegraph in October of last year after an online altercation with a top NHS medic. He apologised, but a few weeks later he was out of work, but not for long. Bob's incredible work deals with themes of politics, ethics and family. He uses emotion and humour to convey important messages, to defend moral principles and to invite people to reflect on what really matters in life. Between 2011 and 2021, Bob was political cartoonist at The Telegraph, and in the course of the pandemic, he created striking illustrations showing the impact of lockdowns and other COVID measures. In January 2022, that's basically just a few weeks ago, Bob began working for the Democracy Fund, a Canadian charity that defends and promotes civil liberties and constitutional rights. Bob produces 3 incredible artworks every week that are available free of charge to any newspaper, magazine or online publication anywhere in the world. And I'm delighted to say Bob Moran joins me now. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Mark.
Let me shake the hand of such a talented artist.
It's great to finally be with you. This is my 3rd attempt at getting here. I was stopped by technology and then weather, and this week the stars have aligned.
That's it.
Be with you.
But you certainly weren't cancelled. This is the home of free speech, and we definitely need to have it. Do you feel that you have tested the boundaries of free speech in the last couple of years?
I think part of the job of any cartoonist is to always push those boundaries and to test where they lie and how far you can take things. That's part of what we're there to do, traditionally.
And tell me about where your career started. We'll get to, the dramas of the last couple of years. But when did you first pick up a pen or a paintbrush?
Pretty much as soon as I could hold a pen, I was doing funny pictures and cartoons, and I spent most of my time at school drawing cartoons with my teachers, and got into quite a lot of trouble for that until the end of school, where they were coming up to me and complaining that I hadn't done a cartoon of them yet.
Right.
I knew I wanted to be a cartoonist for a newspaper when I was about 12 years old, but obviously it's quite a weird niche thing to want to do. Nobody could help me. There's no set course.
And normally every paper has an iconic, legendary cartoonist, and you've got to wait for them to die before you can get the gig.
You have to wait for them to die, and then the idea is that once you get the gig, you stay there until you die. And certainly that was my career plan until.
It's interesting that you, like a lot of comedians actually, but this, through your, in your case, through your art, but you were sort of slightly mocking authority or challenging authority in your own way. I guess that was somehow the template of what you would go on to do.
That's always an instinct I think I've had. I've never. It's not that I've had a problem with authority. It's that I don't like when authority imposes rules that don't make any sense, and I hate hypocrisy. And hypocrisy is something I've always had quite an acute awareness of, and I've sought to call it out.
So how did you develop your craft? I mean, were you helped by art teachers, or are you self-taught?
It's a bit of both, I think. I mean, obviously, there's an underlying instinct there to want to produce this kind of work. And I think it's only recently I've realised that part of what I can do is inject emotion into my work. And whether that's emotion, happy emotion to make people laugh, or to move people, to even frighten people at times in the last couple of years. That was always there, but on top of that, obviously, you have to hone your craft and learn a lot of technical
Did you
skills.
go to art college or anything like that?
I did, yeah. I went to university in Falmouth and did an illustration degree. But I basically looked at all the degrees in the country and said, look, I want to be a political cartoonist, and most of them said, I'm sorry, we can't help you. Falmouth was the only place where they said, OK, yeah, we'll allow you to do that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And how did the Telegraph gig come about? You spent 10 years there. I think it's a great paper. I'm sure you'll agree. It's actually been a rare journalistic voice pushing back on some of the COVID measures, at least drawing attention to the impact of lockdowns, the likes of Alison Pearson and Alistair Heath and others. But how did you come to work for the Telegraph?
I was actually, in 2010, I was at the point of giving up on the dream of being a political cartoonist, and I'd actually enrolled to do a teacher training course. And that summer, the Guardian cartoonists, when they were on holiday, got a few people who were interested to do some cover. So I did that, really enjoyed it. And then the following March, I heard that there was an opening at the Telegraph. So I just sent an email on the off chance, and I got to go in and do a sort of trial. And that was that. That was the beginning of my time there.
And what about your politics? I mean, did they align with those of the Telegraph? Were you encouraged or asked to have a sort of centre-right perspective, or did you just draw the world as you saw it?
No, and I've never been a particularly political person, which some find surprising. But my approach had always been to try and remain quite neutral myself. And on any given day, I look at who I think deserves criticism. And I said that to the editor who gave me the job at the Telegraph, and I think that's what they like.
And surely that's what every great satirist, which is partly what you are, you're a great artist and you're a satirist and a commentator, that you just attack anybody that's hypocritical or in the wrong in some way, anyone in authority. I mean, I always look to the US talk show host David Letterman, would basically lampoon whoever happened to be president at that time.
Yeah, I mean, whatever side you're looking at, there are idiots making stupid mistakes every day. Yeah. So you can't let them get away with it.
Well, that's right, and you haven't let them get away with it, and you haven't let the media get away with it either. Let's take a look at this image that you have drawn of a cow with BBC emblazoned on its fur, although I think you have another version which says MSN. And the cow, for those listening on DAB+, the cow's in a field, lovely clouds in the background. It's a beautiful drawing, except that the cow is spewing poo into the eyes of the viewer who sat on his sofa at home watching telly. So tell me, can you remember when you had that idea? How did that one come about?
I think that I was trying to remember, because that was a while ago now, and I think obviously I'd been annoyed with the BBC for some time to do with its coverage. I can't remember what the story was. It was a particular story that irritated me, and again, that's one of those ideas that I thought was maybe too on the nose, a bit too obvious, but sometimes they're the ones that work best. And you notice it's a male cow.
I mean, I think it would take a fool not to work out what the message is of that remarkable illustration. But what is your view of how the media have covered the pandemic, how they've reported it?
I think there's an instinct in the media, there's an instinct with journalism to approach every issue as a balanced debate. With two sides, make it very nuanced. For me, it was clear quite early on, actually, that this is pretty cut and dry. If you look at it from a moral perspective, there really is no justification for anything that's been done. And the media still pursued this idea. Even a paper like The Telegraph and a few others have been good on this, of presenting another side. They didn't go far enough, I didn't think. And, one of the things I realised early on was what was happening here was a relentless propaganda campaign from the government, constant fear propaganda.
Supported by behavioural scientists and the so-called nudge unit.
Exactly. And what I decided was that rather than being a political cartoonist, I thought of myself as more of a counter-propaganda artist, if that makes sense.
There is anger in your work, isn't there? And that's not confected, is it?
No, I've been angrier over the past 2 years than I ever thought possible.
Do you care to... We don't need to get into the circumstances about why you left the Telegraph. I don't think they're guilty of shutting down free speech or anything like that. I remember that you tweeted, or I think you quote tweeted an NHS doctor in relation to pandemic measures. She was offended. You apologised, but in your apology, you explained why you'd sent that controversial tweet and why you were so angry. I mean, would you be able to share that with me? And it's in relation to your own family.
Yes. So my eldest daughter, Poppy, was born in very difficult circumstances, and she has cerebral palsy and epilepsy. And
I think it's worth adding that you felt, and your wife felt, very badly let down by the NHS in relation to the delivery.
Yes.
And that provoked you to then fight for your daughter forevermore.
Huge mistakes were made. Mark, the thing is, I learnt a very important lesson that day 9 years ago in a very hard way, which is that when you know in your gut that something is wrong, something happening is wrong, and people you love are being harmed, you have to stand up and do something about it, no matter how futile it seems, no matter what the cost might be to you, and no matter how many people think you shouldn't do that. I didn't then, and Poppy paid the price.
I think the delivery team, midwives, nurses, doctors, told you everything's okay, the baby will be fine. You felt in your gut that it wasn't. This was your little girl, and your gut instinct was right, and she suffered major health implications as a result of mistakes made. And obviously, at that moment, you're a changed man, I would have thought.
Yeah, it completely changed my whole perspective on life. I mean, that happens when you become a parent anyway. You're never quite the same again. But it's changed my perception of risk. It changed my whole understanding of fear, the trust we place in institutions. And
experts?
Experts, so-called experts, yeah. And the importance of trusting your gut sometimes, that's the thing, and not being afraid to stand up and call something out when you know it's wrong. And that's really why I've taken this line over the last 2 years, and why I have lost a lot. It's cost me an awful lot, but I haven't lost my integrity. I haven't had to sacrifice my principles. Most importantly of all, I've not lost the ability to protect my children and defend their rights.
And your daughter has been impacted by COVID measures, hasn't she?
Well,
Whether it's mask wearing and lockdowns and all the rest of it.
Yes, massively.
Because your daughter does have certain particular needs.
She has very complex needs. She needs a lot of therapy that all stopped. She does swimming, riding for the disabled every week. That all stopped. School is really hard for her anyway. Obviously, the schools were closed for a lot of the time, and then they had masks. They were doing social distancing, washing hands. None of this stuff she understands. She finds communication very difficult anyway. We've actually taken her out of school now because the mask situation became too absurd. And to be honest, we didn't feel safe leaving her there. But, the thing is, Mark, there are thousands of families like us. There are families who've had it much worse than we've had it. And the point is, they don't have a voice. No one is interested in listening to them. And part of the reason I made that statement after I'd lost my job wasn't just to contextualise the things I'd said. It was to try and make people aware of what's been going on. How these families and these children, especially, have been thrown under the bus throughout all of this. The most vulnerable, the most undeniably vulnerable people in our society are disabled children. And they haven't been having the care they needed.
Well, let's take a look at a couple of images that reflect that. We'll go through them, if we can, in order. First of all, your take on Partygate. Boris Johnson slumped on a table. He appears to have vomited on the rules, which are printed out on a A4 sheet of paper. Lots of drinks around, a few syringes as well, because you've had a few things to say about the vaccine and vaccine mandates, which we'll come to. Moving on to our next illustration, another absolute classic in my view, and this was your commentary on Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada's effective cleansing of Canadian truckers off the streets of Ottawa. Trudeau's making a speech and a truck is about to land on his head. And how about this one then? One of the particularly resonant and iconic images that you've been responsible for over the last couple of years. Protect the vulnerable. It's a pensioner wearing a sort of baby carrier. I think it's called a papoose, a child baby backpack. The baby's in the front of the backpack. And it says on the backpack, farmer stab vest. So take me through the meaning of that particular illustration.
That's an interesting one because it's one of the few cartoons where I actually had the idea and then sat on it for a long time. I didn't put it out because I wondered if it was a bit too hard-hitting or perhaps it wasn't quite the right time. And images like that, they're not easy to create. It's quite a difficult thing to have to sit down and draw. And again, it's sort of motivated a lot by my own passion and emotion for things. It's absolutely not saying that the elderly themselves have chosen to do this. It's a sort of this, the burden has been, or the sacrifice of children to protect the elderly has been enforced, basically. It's been done
to policy.
them.
It's been policy, and I can't disagree with that. School closures, vaccination of young children, 12 to 15-year-olds, which was against the advice of the JCVI. Protect the vulnerable is, of course, the message that's underneath that image of a pensioner, quite literally wearing a child as a sort of human shield. So what about the vaccine? You've drawn a lot of illustrations in relation to the vaccine. What's your view on it?
Yeah, I mean, there are several different layers to the vaccine issue. I mean, on the one hand, it was never my feeling that we necessarily needed a vaccine due to the severity or not particular severity of this virus, you know, with the IFR and the age groups affected and the underlying health conditions of most of the people.
We were told early in the pandemic that once the key vulnerable groups had been vaccinated, we could cry freedom. Those are the words of Matt Hancock, then Health Secretary.
Yes, of course, but then the other point I would make to people is that these people had torn our lives apart and not been honest with us and acted in completely unethical ways from the beginning. Those same people presented us with a vaccine and made all these promises about it. I think any intelligent person would have been right to be sceptical about all they were saying to do with the vaccine. You know, I think that there's a problem with the labels through this. To be labelled an anti-vaxxer, you know, it was already established that anti-vaxxers were this mad fringe group of people in society who were a massive problem for scientists and doctors. You know, an awful lot of people who are against this vaccine, who've decided not to have it, have had all their other vaccines. They've had everything else that's ever been offered to them. And it just stifles debate when you throw these silly labels at people, you know. And yeah, my feeling with the vaccine is that it's all part of the same tyranny. Basically, it's been used as a tool to restrict people's freedom, and you know, to an extent, time will tell just how A, ineffective and B, potentially dangerous it might be,
as well as lockdowns and other COVID measures.
Yes, and what a lot of it amounts to, this is the key problem, I think, is that everyone talks about saving lives. It's all about saving lives. That's what we've got to do. But lockdowns kill people. We know that now, and actually it was obvious at the beginning. The government knew it at the beginning. What you're engaging in there as a government isn't saving lives, it's trading lives. You're saying we're prepared for these people to die because we think it will help these people to live.
If anyone's pushing back on that, I would draw attention to an NHS waiting list of potentially 14 million people once it peaks. I mean, if that's not going to result in a loss of life, I don't know what is. The University of Bristol told me on this programme that creating the biggest recession in 300 years will likely shorten 500,000 lives.
And everybody was on board with this. You know, most people, when we had austerity, were pointing out how many people can die from being plunged into extreme poverty. What's happened over the last 2 years is likely to be far worse than anything austerity did. And suddenly the same people are now denying that anyone will die as a result.
Isn't there another point, Bob, and we're clocked against us, and I want to talk about your merch, by the way, because you need to make some cash, and we're on national TV, and I've got so many loyal viewers who are going to help you out, I guarantee that. But I've had a question which no one can answer in the course of this pandemic, notwithstanding whether lockdowns worked or not. And look, I don't think the government were being evil. They were panicking. They didn't know about the virus. And let's hope that we're wrong and it was the right thing to do. OK, I'd love to be proved wrong. No problem. My mind is open. And also in relation to the vaccine, the government are very clear it's safe to those to whom it's available. I'm triple jabbed as well, but I think we can both agree it's personal choice that's the key.
Absolutely.
But all of that said, why is it OK to wreck lives? Because that's the thing. I feel like we've had a policy where once viable businesses have been closed down, kids have been kept out of school, and people haven't been able to sort of interact with each other, visit family. In Australia, there's a woman in a Melbourne hospital who's got days to live and she can't meet her family because of renewed COVID measures. We're in a very
happened
cruel,
here as well,
cruel
of course.
Time. It happened here.
It's happened
so why is it OK to wreck lives? Because I feel that's what we've done.
We have wrecked lives. And
that's OK now.
This all comes down to what is the meaning of life? What gives life meaning? It's not simply the absence of a risk of death. It's not just longevity. It's not how long you can live for. It's not just about existence. It's about living.
Well, take a look at that then. This is perhaps your best-selling image. Never surrender your right to be with the people you love. Funnily enough, it's your least furious illustration, the least angry, the least contentious.
It is, yeah.
But it translates.
But in some ways, it's the most controversial, that one. It's
really?
I still get the most pushback with that one. Yeah, absolutely, which is extraordinary.
So how many kids do you have?
3 now.
Got 3. And
yes.
well, my warm best wishes to your missus and your 3 kids, including your daughter,
Thank you.
Who you have been fighting for. And it must have been a very, very tough 2 years for her. And we wish her well.
Thank you. She's doing very well.
The other 2 as well.
Thanks.
They're very lucky. They've got a very talented and creative dad who needs to make a living now. I'm not going to lie. But he's got a website, bobmoran.co.uk, Moran. And actually, Bob sent me a photograph, and it's the one of mainstream media with the cow pooing on the viewer. I'm actually going to get a picture of that taken, and I'll tweet it out, and I'll send you the link to his website. But it is Bob Moran. It's that. You can get T-shirts for that. So tell me about the merch. Come on, let's make some money.
Yeah, so people were asking me for a long time if they could have T-shirts and hoodies and things, and it took me a while to sort it out. But now, if you go to my website, you can order T-shirts, hoodies, and sweatshirts with various different cartoons on them. And you can also buy original artworks and prints on there too.
There you go. Yeah. Fantastic stuff. Well, of course, other artwork is available, but it's great that we talked to Bob about what he does. His website is bobmoran.co.uk, Moran. Fascinating stuff. And his illustrations will cost nothing. Artworks can now be downloaded free of charge and featured in publications anywhere in the world as a result of his partnership by the Democracy Fund. Long live democracy and long live Bob Moran. Bob, it's been a privilege to have you in the studio. Thank you for finally making it from the wilds of the West Country.
Thanks,
and I
Bob.
do hope, come and join us again on the panel. We'd love to have you back.